And we are taking you live to the U.S. State Department now, where they're holding a press conference. Let's listen in.
Be protected sites, but it is concerning that after Israel had conducted an operation earlier in this campaign to clear al-Shifa, that al-Shifa again was apparently infiltrated by Hamas fighters. And so two things about that. One, look, obviously it would be great if Hamas would stop hiding behind civilians and stop hiding inside civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. But two, it points out what we have been saying all along, which is the need for Israel to have a sustainable long-term strategy when it comes to Gaza, that it's not enough to just clear certain neighborhoods or hospitals or any other geographic areas or buildings of Hamas. They need to have a long-term sustainable strategy that is not just a security strategy, but also a political strategy if they really want to secure the future of Israel against the terrorist threat that has to date emanated from Gaza.
Right. So you don't have any comment on what you've seen from the aftermath of the 2-week operation against the hospital?
Not beyond what I just
All right.
just outlined.
And then when you just say, and this will be it for me, when you say Israel needs a sustainable long-term strategy for Gaza, have you seen one yet from them?
We have not yet seen one, no. And that's what we have been in conversation with them about.
Yeah, but presumably the meeting today is just about Rafah, right?
It's just about Rafah. And the point, I mean, a sustainable long-term strategy means something beyond a military strategy. It means a political path as well.
Right. So a political path to two states.
That is our preferred policy. But you need a political path of some sort forward.
Have you seen one from the Israelis that is even short of two states?
At this point, we have not. No.
All right. Thank you.
Just follow up on al-Shifa. Israel has given some numbers. 200 militants have been killed, 900 suspected militants detained, of whom some 500 have been identified as Hamas. Does the United States have any assessment that these numbers are correct?
We don't have an independent assessment, no.
Do you have an assessment on how many civilians around that operation have been killed?
We do not.
Okay. Moving on to this strike, this suspected Israeli strike in Damascus, do you have anything to say on this?
I don't. Obviously, it just happened in the hour or two before I came out here. We are in conversations with partners in the region, gathering more information, but at this point don't have confirmation either of the target or the responsible party.
Do you know if the United States was given a heads up by Israel about this?
Again, we are gathering information. I don't have anything about the strike right now. I don't have anything beyond that to offer.
Okay. Do you have any concerns that this might sort of escalate tensions, which are already high? And in a way endanger the hostage talks in any way?
I don't want to, before we have gathered information about what exactly this was, I don't want to speak to it specifically, but of course we are always concerned about anything that would be escalatory or cause an increase in conflict in the region. It has been one of the goals of this administration since October 7th to keep the conflict from spreading, recognizing that Israel has the right to defend itself from adversaries that are sworn to its destruction. But with respect to the hostage talks, there's no reason why this incident should have any impact on the hostage talks. We have long believed it is in the interest of everyone to see these hostage talks succeed, because you would not just see a relief to the civilian population in Gaza that desperately needs it. It would enable the increase in humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and of course it would get the hostages out. So no, I don't know. I don't believe it should have any impact on it.
Can you say how those talks are going?
I don't have any new assessment to offer today.
Okay, two final things. This is about this is from last week about these authorizations of these bombs to Israel. They have been approved a long time ago by Congress, but looks like the State Department has decided to do the transfers last week, the week before. Why was that decision taken, recently?
So I think it would be helpful to step back and put this in a little context. And the context is that the United States has a decades-long commitment to Israel's security. Israel is surrounded by entities that are sworn to its destruction, not just Hamas, but Iran and proxy groups that Iran sponsors, Hezbollah among them, who have repeatedly talked about their desire for the destruction of Israel. We believe Israel has every right to defend itself against those opponents, and we, to that end, have a long-standing security relationship with them where we provide them more than $3 billion annually in security assistance. Now, the way that that works, and I know you preface this in your question, but just for the benefit of everyone else, the way that that works is we provide them with $3.3 billion a year in security assistance. They don't always draw all of that down in any given year, but they come to the United States, request certain defense articles. We make assessments about whether those are appropriate or not. We notify them to Congress in the regular course of business. And oftentimes what happens, let's say, just as an example, this is a fictional example, let's say they requested 100 planes. We make a decision, we notify Congress. That doesn't mean that they take 100 planes tomorrow once that notification has been given and once the approval has been given. They draw those down over time, and sometimes it takes years to fulfill those requests. And so those are the types of things that I see you wanting to go. Bear with me. I know this is long, and then you'll have the opportunity for follow-up. Those are the types of things that often take years to fulfill. And they were happening before October 7th, and they have continued after October 7th. So what these are about, in many cases, are about self-defense, but also deterrence and replenishment. And so we make these in the regular course of business. And what I can tell you about them is that we follow the same procedures with respect to everyone that we do for every other country in the world, which is that we notify Congress. And in fact, since October 7th, we have gone above and beyond to notify Congress about these transfers. There is a statutory threshold where we are required to notify them of transfers. We have been regularly briefing the committees to make them aware of every transfer that we are making.
So I'm going to have to combine my questions now that you've taken up so much time to answer. I understand.
I would apologize, but I don't think you'd believe it.
I'm just joking. Of course, take your time. I understand the fulfillment can take years, but are you basically saying that the authorization of the transfer coming in these recent weeks was a coincidence?
I'm not saying it's a coincidence. Israel has been engaged in a military conflict. And of course, when you are engaged in a military conflict, you deplete your military stocks.
So there was a request in recent weeks for the additional fulfillment of these particular weapons.
As is always the case, I'm not getting into the timings of exact requests from here. I'll be quick. But this is a process that we keep Congress fully apprised of, our relevant committees. But when you see these types of requests and when they get publicly reported on, you have to remember that Israel is in an armed conflict and is expending a great deal of defense material, and some of that needs to be replenished for Israel's long-term security.
Right. And my final thing on this is, like, Secretary and a lot of senior officials from this administration basically said far too many Palestinians have been killed. But when you go and and we know that the administration's policy hasn't changed. It is not conditioning weapons to Israel. But when you go and make such an authorization of the transfer in recent weeks, even if the actual weapons transfer has been approved years ago, don't you think that is going to damage the weight of your word, your credibility, and basically your sincerity in saying that far too many Palestinians have been killed?
I do not agree with that at all. We have been very clear that we want to see Israel do everything it can to minimize civilian casualties. We have made clear that they need to operate at all times in full compliance with international humanitarian law. At the same time, we are committed to Israel's right to self-defense, and this is a long-term commitment the United States has made, that it made before October 7th, and that continues it continues since October 7th. So obviously, the fight in Gaza is connected to Israel's long-term security in very substantial ways. I got into some of that with response to Matt's question. But Israel still faces, in addition to the security challenge posed in Gaza, it still faces an Iran that is hostile to Israel. It still faces Hezbollah on its northern border that is hostile to Israel and says it is committed to the destruction of Israel. And so we are going to continue to support Israel's ability to defend itself against those sworn enemies that want to see it end as a modern state or a state at all.
Just to follow up, a 2,000-pound bomb is self-defense, in your opinion?
So they need to have the ability to defend themselves against a very well-armed adversary. Like I said, Iran, Hezbollah, which has thousands and thousands of fighters and quite sophisticated material and quite sophisticated weaponry, as we've seen them deploy, excuse me, against Israel in the last few days. So yes, they do need the modern military equipment to defend themselves against these adversaries.
In Gaza before, in the beginning in Gaza.
And we have made clear to them that whatever weapon they use in Gaza, be it a bomb, be it a tank round, be it anything, that we expect them to use those weapons in full compliance with international humanitarian law. And we have had very frank conversations with them about the fact that far too many civilians have died through their operations, and that they need to do better in taking into account the need to minimize civilian harm, and we'll continue to do that.
Just on that point, okay, took the requests were done years ago, what have you, but this time around you're suspiciously very careful not to publicize it. Usually you do the notifications to Congress, you do a statement, what have you. This time, I understand you didn't need to do it because it was passed, but
I just say we did notify Congress.
No, I know,
we
but you didn't
followed
publicize it.
So it is
Usually
not.
you do on arms sales and all that. You publicize it.
So that's not true with respect to most arms sales around the world. I know people have gotten used to the tempo of arms sales with respect to Ukraine, but that is a very different situation than our arms sales to Israel or any other country with which we have a security relationship, because we stood it up from nowhere right before an active war, where most of our security relationships, we don't publicize our ongoing sales. What we do is we notify Congress about those sales, and we have done that with respect to these sales to Israel, as we do with respect to sales anywhere in the world.
Okay. Just a last question back on Damas. I understand it's a bit early, but obviously you don't deny there was a strike by Israel on the consulate in the annex in the embassy of Iran in Damas.
So we've seen the strike, but again, I want to let the consultations that we have ongoing with partners in the region take place before I comment any further.
But it's definitely escalatory.
That's not what I said either. I said
no. I'm saying that.
You're saying that, great. I thought it was a question.
I'm asking for your reaction.
So Humera kind of that's good. Humera kind of did speak to this. I'm not going to comment with respect to this particular strike because again, we just need to know more information about it before we do, and that includes drawing any conclusions from it. As a general principle, of course, we are worried about escalation. We are worried about anything that would cause the conflict to expand or widen in any way.
I have one on Havana, a couple.
Let me come back to you so the room doesn't go into an uproar. Saeed, go ahead. I will definitely come back.
Thank you, Matt. Now, you said that Hamas returned to al-Shifa hospital. There were some 800 fighters and so on and all these things. Now, is that you are citing the Israeli narrative, or you have your own independent information?
We don't have our own independent assessment, but you have seen Israel produce the names,
right.
photographs of known Hamas fighters who it has killed or captured.
How many? I mean, they showed names and Hamas fighters in the Shifa hospital.
I have seen the information they have publicly released.
Right.
I know you get. Let me just.
No, I'm with you. I'm not interrupting. I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
So we have seen them release. I don't think there's anyone who has cause to dispute that. Yes, they have. There were Hamas fighters hiding in al-Shifa hospital again, not for the first time.
Okay, so you are certain that the reason that Israel went into al-Shifa hospital one more time is because Hamas fighters were there, and not hundreds of civilians that have taken refuge there.
So I think it is certainly a fair conclusion, given what has been their goal since the outset of this campaign, to take the fight to Hamas. That is exactly what they were doing.
And you believe that Israel has achieved that goal now by eliminating Hamas, or are we likely to see them go back to al-Shifa hospital again?
So that is, I answered that question somewhat in response to Matt. I think there is a concern that you saw Hamas back inside hospitals. I don't know why I don't hear more people calling on Hamas to stop going into hospitals. You shouldn't have to clear Hamas from a hospital once, let alone twice. But yes, we do have the concern that Hamas has been able to reestablish itself in a hospital that Israel had already cleared, and that points to an ongoing challenge for Israel in the way it conducts its operations.
Right. Yeah, just bear with me. A couple more questions. But why do you think, in your opinion, what value is there strategically for Israel to burn all the buildings, destroy all the equipment, destroy every last X-ray machine and everything in the hospital and not keep it? If their fight is with the fighters, why must you destroy? As they left, there was no fighting when they left, just to burn the buildings and burn the things and destroy everything.
So let me just say,
why is that okay?
Let me just say this gets into where I'm often asked to comment to questions where there are conflicting accounts.
Right.
And Israel has said that is not what they did, and we don't have ground truth on that question. Israel has said what they tried to do is protect patients and not operate in places when there are patients, to evacuate people from the hospital, and only operate in a way that would impact the Hamas fighters that were there. Obviously, it's an incredibly difficult situation. There shouldn't be terrorists in a hospital at all. And so it's incredibly difficult to operate there and achieve a legitimate counterterrorism goal in a way that minimizes harm to patients, which goes back to my first point, which is Hamas shouldn't be in a hospital at all.
Okay. Well, Hamas shouldn't be, as far as Israel and the United States is concerned, should not be there, period. But
I would think, Saeed, everyone could conclude. I would think, including you, I would think everyone could conclude that Hamas should not be inside a hospital. I hope anyway that that's not a controversial opinion.
Well, okay, but that's a different issue altogether. Now,
Not really. No, it's kind of the core of what we're talking about.
Okay. Let me ask you something. You talked about the 2,000-pound bombs and so on. You think that it is really wise to send it at this time? When this far in this battle, or this war, it has only been used in Gaza. I mean, I know you say that Israel is surrounded by, people that wish it would and so on. But in fact, it's surrounded by Egypt with very good relations with Israel, surrounded by Jordan with good relations with Israel, surrounded by Syria, that is obviously embroiled in its own civil war and cannot even defend itself against attacks as we have seen today. So quite the contrary, Israel is surrounding Hamas, and it's using these weapons to do that. And in fact, I mean, the F-35, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, has only been used in combat against the people of Gaza. So how could you justify sending all these weapons when you have the most hapless people probably on earth, destroyed, moving from one place to another, and so on, and you send these weapons to sort of just finish the job or continue the job? I don't know.
So,
what logic is there in sending those weapons?
So the logic is exactly what I outlined a moment ago. Despite the fact that Israel has diplomatic relations with Egypt and Jordan, it does not change the fact that Hezbollah is parked on its northern border and is sworn to the destruction of Israel. It does not change the fact that Iran, not right on its border, but well within striking distance, is committed to the destruction of Israel and continues to fund proxies committed to the destruction of Israel. So yes, Israel faces incredibly serious threats, not just from Hamas, although Hamas is clearly one, as we saw on October 7th, but from other adversaries that it needs our assistance to continue to defend itself against.
Lastly, please, just one last one, if I may. Are you aware of a report made or a conversation that Israeli officers made or an interview with Haaretz, where they say that Israel established some sort of an illusionary, kill zone line and so on? Are you aware of that? And they actually kill whoever walks or moves about in that area?
I read that article, and I noted that in it the IDF says that of course, is not what they have established. There are, of course, areas of significant combat where any civilian could wander in and be unfortunately be killed either by fire from Israel or by fire from Hamas. If you walk into an active conflict zone, that's a possibility. But I have noted that the IDF said they have not, of course, established kill zones. It would be incredibly inappropriate for anything like that to be established, and we've not seen evidence at this point that they have. Go ahead, I'll come to you next.
There's reporting that Israel submitted a plan to the UN that would essentially dismantle UNRA, transferring staff and funds to World Food and some other organizations. Have you seen that plan? Do you support it?
I have not seen that plan. I can't speak to whether somebody inside the United States government has. we continue to support the work that UNRWA does, both in Gaza and in the broader region. We think that they play a critical role in delivering humanitarian assistance to people who need it. Now, the United States cannot fund UNRWA by statute now, given the recent action by Congress. So we are exploring ways that we can direct the humanitarian assistance we are committed to providing the Palestinian people through other organizations. And we look forward to identifying ways to do that and continuing to support humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians. But that does not mean that we do not also support UNRWA's work. We want to see it continue.
Matt, today the Knesset passed a law 70-10, voting to pave the way for the closure of all Al Jazeera offices inside Israel. I'm just wondering if you have a comment on that.
So we support the independent free press anywhere in the world. And we think the work that the independent free press does is important everywhere in the world. And much of what we know about what has happened in Gaza is because of reporters who are there doing their jobs, including reporters from Al Jazeera. I'll say, with respect to Al Jazeera, obviously, I think it's well known that we've not always agreed with all of Al Jazeera's coverage, but it's a media organization that we engage with. I've done interviews with Al Jazeera. Other people from the department have done interviews with Al Jazeera. So what we will continue to make clear is that we support the work that the Free Press does.
Our assessment with that passage of this law and previous incidents to our crew in Gaza that this enhanced our suspicion from the beginning that our crews were actually targeted, not by mistake or by. Does this trouble you that a media organization just becomes the target of the Israel and become part of the targets in this war?
So with respect to targeting, I mean targeting in a sense, not through a law passed by the Knesset, but I think with respect to potential military targeting, Israel has said very clearly that that's not what they have done. Obviously, that would be incredibly inappropriate. You've heard the Secretary speak to this, that it is tragic how many journalists have lost their life in this war. Because as I just spoke to a minute ago, they put their own lives at risk in bringing us information about what's happening inside Gaza. And it's important that we continue to get that information. And so we support the work that journalists do in Gaza. We support the work that they do around the world. Tom, go ahead.
Just to go back to the meeting between US and Israeli officials, why is this happening virtually?
I will leave it to the White House, which is the primary. White House took the lead in organizing this meeting, so I'll leave it to them.
But I mean, there's an important diplomatic element because we know, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu said in press conference yesterday that he pulled the delegation traveling to send a message because of the UN Security Council vote. So it will worry people that on such an important issue, and it's not a long flight from Tel Aviv, that this meeting is not happening.
We have been listening there to the U.S. State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, who's holding a news conference addressing many issues, but all to do with Israel's war on Gaza, including its siege, the aftermath of its siege on al-Shifa hospital, and importantly, the latest attack on the Iranian embassy building, on the Iranian embassy compound, rather, in the Syrian capital, Damascus. Listening into all of this is our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. She's live for us in Washington, D.C. Good to see you, Kimberly. And Matthew Miller saying that they don't have their own information, they don't have confirmation, he said, of the target or the responsibility, but they're working with partners in the region to find out more.
That's right. Not only was this a focus of questions at the State Department briefing that has, as we see, still is ongoing, but also the White House briefing that has just wrapped up with the press secretary, Jean-Pierre. This is something that was developing as that White House briefing was ongoing. And as a result, the press secretary was unable to comment, but did say that the U.S. President Joe Biden was aware. He had been briefed about the missile attack on the Iranian consulate compound and that the team was looking into it. And this is something that has been confirmed by Matthew Miller, the spokesperson for the U.S. State Department. So from the standpoint of the Biden administration, they are keenly aware of what has taken place and are keenly aware of the ramifications of this attack. What you have heard there from Matthew Miller is, of course, when they talk about ramifications, they are concerned about a broader escalation. This is something that the Biden administration has been concerned about, Israel's war on Gaza, for some time. We've seen this with regard to spillage into Lebanon, when there have been concerns about Israel looking for Hamas fighters into Lebanon, and there are certainly going to be concerns about any sort of Iranian proxies and sort of Israel's waging its war on Iranian proxies beyond and in the broader Middle East. And so this is something that the Biden administration is certainly looking into, and it's concern with regard to the fact that we know with this missile attack, there have been 3 senior IRGC generals that have been killed. The concern now, of course, when we've seen these kind of attacks, that there is always retaliation and what that might look like. Could it be retaliation on U.S. forces? Could it be retaliation on forces, U.S. forces in Syria, in Iraq? That is the big question for the United States right now. And also, will this look like an intensification of missiles fired towards Israel by Iran and its proxies? Those are the big concerns for the United States. So the United States, again, as the story is developing, looking at how this will play out in terms of how this could broaden, something that has been a major concern for the Biden administration since the Israel's war on Gaza began in mid-October.
Kimberly, thank you very much for that. That's our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, live in Washington, D.C.